Daily Show desk gleamed under studio lights, the skyline backdrop blinking like a slow heartbeat. Jon Stewart rolled a pen between his fingers and wore that familiar half grin that says, "Go ahead, try me." Opposite him sat Prince Harry, shoulders squared, jaw set, the kind of stare that dares a room to breathe wrong. What began as a victory lap interview about new projects and purpose would, in minutes, detour into a live wire collision. Jokes sharpened into scalpels, answers fired like warnings, and a studio audience caught between laughter and the hush that comes right before glass breaks. Tonight wasn't just television. It was a stress test for ego, empathy, and the thin line between telling your truth and torching the room with it. "Welcome back," Jon said, palms open to the audience's cheer. "My guest tonight, veteran, author, creator, father, and a man who once made every tabloid editor's mortgage payment at the same time, Prince Harry." Applause swelled. Harry offered a thin nod that hit somewhere south of gracious. "Good evening," he said, British sandpaper over steel. "Let's try to keep this less tabloid and more intelligent." Jon's grin widened. "That is always the plan. Results may vary." A ripple of laughter diffused, then settled. "Let's start simple. You've talked a lot about service, military service, mental health advocacy, veteran support. What's the clearest win this year that isn't about, well, you?" Harry blinked once. "If people insist on asking me, it will, by definition, be about me. But fine, the win is that I'm still willing to sit here and answer that kind of question." A few audience members chuckled. Jon made a small circle in the air with his pen. "So, the victory is continuing to do interviews. Bold. I'm going to tattoo that on my therapist." Harry's smile tightened into a line. "You make light of things you don't understand, Jon. It's your brand. And yours is turning a loaded question into a live grenade," Jon replied, mild as tea. "Let me frame it cleaner. You left an ancient institution. You built a new platform. What have you built that outlives the headlines?" "The idea," Harry said, leaning forward, "that no title, royal or otherwise, should keep you from saying what must be said, including here." "Great," Jon said. "Let's say some things." He shuffled his cards. "You've spoken poignantly about your mum. The late Princess Diana is sacred ground for many viewers. When you say the press killed her, and then partner with media companies to tell your story, some folks get whiplash. How do you square that circle without needing a neck brace?" The air thinned. Harry's eyes cooled. "I square it by telling my story on my terms, not theirs. There's a difference between a predator with a camera and a platform that lets you speak." "Absolutely," Jon said, nodding. "But to the average person, a lens pointed at you is a lens pointed at you. If it walks like a camera and quacks like a camera—" "Quacking is your profession," Harry said. "Mine is survival." The audience oohed. Jon lifted his hands. "No poultry defamation intended," he reset. "All right, Meghan, your wife has been a force." "She has a name," Harry snapped. "She's a human being, not a lightning rod." "Respectfully, I used her name," Jon replied, still even. "I'm pro-human, anti-rod." Laughter sputtered and died quickly. "You've both said you wanted privacy and peace, yet there's a book, a doc, a series of sit-downs. Fans say you're reclaiming narrative. Critics say you're renting it out by the hour. What do you say to the criticism that the privacy pitch has started to sound like a tour schedule?" Harry's jaw flexed. "Privacy doesn't mean silence. It means choosing. We choose when and how. If people are upset that we won't bleed on command, that's their addiction, not our hypocrisy." Jon pursed his lips. "Fair distinction. But when your choices keep landing on streaming homepages, people wonder if the recovery is also a revenue model." "Look," Harry said, a slice of contempt in the word, "people wonder many things, usually from couches. Wondering isn't knowing." A murmur wove through the seats. Jon drummed the pen once, twice. "Let's talk the firm. No spoilers," he quipped, then softened. "You've alleged cruelty and indifference from the institution. Do you think there's a line where advocacy turns into ongoing retribution? Where the message becomes less fix this and more feel this?" Harry's laugh was small and humorless. "Revenge would be easier than telling the truth and watching people like you smirk through it." "Smirk is permanent," Jon said, touching his face. "Came with the hairline. The room giggled. Harry didn't. Genuinely, many viewers admire your service and grief, but they also think every path leads back to your grievance map. Are you worried the causes you care about, vets, mental health, get lost in the royal fog machine? The causes are fine, Harry said. What gets lost is basic respect. I didn't trade one palace for another. I stepped outside and found every street had a camera, including yours. Jon nodded. My camera is very gentle. It eats only sarcasm. He flipped a card. Let's get granular. You've criticized the tabloids, and many deserve it, but you also sue frequently. Some editors say they feel chilled. Do you worry your legal strategy becomes a warning label? Discuss at your peril? Imagine thinking consequences are chilling, Harry said. If you don't want to be sued, try not lying. Jon whistled softly. Hot take Tuesday, and it's not even Tuesday. He glanced to the crowd. Should we open a window? A few laughs. Yeah, tried another tack. Your brother, William. Harry's stare stiffened. Jon kept his voice light. Families fight. Mine argues about bagels. Yours argues about, coronations. Do you see a path back to each other that doesn't require a press release and a 5-part docuseries? Harry's answer came clipped. My family is not your monologue material. Understood, Jon said, still calm. But you've made them interview material, by choice. So I'm asking, human to human, do you want reconciliation, or is the new border permanent? I want accountability, Harry said, and for a moment his voice cracked just enough to suggest a human pulse pulsing beneath the armor. Then it hardened. And I'm not workshopping it on a comedy show. Jon tilted his head. This is the Daily Show. On our best nights, it's therapy with a laugh track. The crowd chuckled. You're doing great, by the way. You haven't sued me yet. Give it time, Harry muttered. There it was, the flint on stone. The crowd's sound rode a seesaw, half amused, half bracing. Jon inhaled and changed lanes again. Veterans, he said. You've done undeniable good there. When the spotlight pitches back to that work, people lean in. Could you imagine a year, just one, where the mission outruns the memoir? Harry's eyes flashed. I didn't write a memoir for your approval. I wrote it because your industry demanded more from my pain than I did. My industry also demands we break for ads, Jon replied. But let's push a little. Pain monetized is still pain. But when every chapter is a siren about the family, people stop hearing the veterans in the next room. Harry sat back, a cold smile forming. If people stop hearing, that's your fault. You're the one with the microphone. Jon stared at him for one beat longer than comfort allowed. The grin faded, not gone, just thin. I'll own my part, he said quietly. But you're holding one too. The band's bumper sting hovered, waiting for a cue that didn't come. Jon finally tapped his mug. We're going to take a quick break, he told the camera, the tone friendly, the eyes not. When we come back, we'll talk about how a boy who ran behind a coffin became a man trying to outrun an echo, and whether that echo ever stops. The applause sign flashed. The clapping was dutiful, unsure. On the couch, Prince Harry folded his arms, gaze locked on Jon, as if the break were just a shorter word for round 2. And somewhere above the rafters, the show's old wiring hummed like it knew a surge was coming. When the show returned from commercial, the atmosphere had shifted. The laughter cues still blinked above the crowd, but no one seemed sure when, or if, to use them. Jon shuffled his notes with the air of a man trying to defuse a bomb while smiling for the camera. We're back with Prince Harry, he said. And, I think we've already covered enough ground to qualify for a therapy copay. The audience chuckled. Harry didn't. Jon leaned in, elbows resting on the desk. So, before the break, you said you're fighting for accountability. Let's talk about that. Accountability for whom? The press? The palace? Or maybe the parts of yourself that, I don't know, still enjoy the spotlight you say you've outgrown? Harry's eyes hardened. You think this is about fame? Jon shrugged, his tone deceptively light. I think it's about attention. Fame's just the invoice. Harry's smirk was sharp. You sound like the tabloids you pretend to despise. Jon held up a hand. Hey, I don't write about your grocery list. I just read the headlines that you helped make. The audience gave an uneasy laugh. Harry tilted his head, voice low and cool. Maybe it's easier to laugh at me than face what your industry does to people. Jon sighed softly. My industry makes jokes, Harry. Yours made crowns and casualties. Let's not swap moral high ground just yet. A flicker of something crossed Harry's face. Discomfort, irritation, maybe both, but it vanished quickly. Let's pivot, Jon said. You've talked about wanting to protect your family's mental health. That's commendable. But when every interview ends up dissecting your wife, your brother, your father, doesn't that reopen the wounds you say you're healing? Harry leaned forward. Healing isn't hiding, Jon. It's confronting. Maybe that's a concept foreign to you. Jon smiled faintly. Not foreign, just not televised every 3 months. The audience gasped. Harry's jaw flexed. You know, you comedians think everything's a punchline until the punch lands on you. Jon's eyes narrowed, still calm. True, but I usually land mine on purpose. For a few seconds, silence hung heavy between them. The tension had a pulse. Even the cameraman seemed to be holding his breath. Jon cleared his throat. Let's talk about Diana, if we can. You've said her story drives everything you do. Do you ever worry that you've turned grief into currency, that the pain has become marketable? Harry's glare could have burned through the desk. How dare you? Jon didn't flinch. I'm daring because the question deserves asking. You've shared more about her than anyone else alive. But sometimes, when people keep reopening the same wound, you start to wonder if they want it to heal at all. Harry's hands tightened on his knees. My mother died running from people like you. Jon's voice softened, but it didn't waver. And I've spent my career tearing those people apart. But if we can't separate memory from monetization, then maybe no one's running anymore. Maybe we're just circling the same block with better lighting. The audience was silent. Even the control room had stopped, whispering. Harry leaned closer, voice sharp as a knife. You've no right to lecture me about grief. You don't know what it's like to have the world feed on your pain. Jon nodded slowly. You're right, I don't. But I do know what it looks like when pain starts feeding back. Harry exhaled hard, his composure slipping. This is exactly why I don't do shows like this. You twist everything. You act like you care, but it's all performance. Jon smiled grimly. That's rich, coming from the guy with a Netflix doc called Harry and Meghan, The Truth. Laughter erupted from the audience before anyone could stop it. Harry's expression turned stone. Jon leaned back, giving him space. Look, I don't think you're lying. I think you're lost. And that's fine. Most of us are. But every time you sit down on another couch, the story starts to sound less like truth and more like branding. Harry's tone dropped into quiet fury. You can't stand that I tell my own story. You want me quiet, another royal puppet doing charity handshakes and pretending everything's fine. I won't do that. Jon shook his head. No one wants you quiet. We just want you real, not rehearsed, not reactive. Real. Harry shot back. Maybe reality makes you uncomfortable. Jon nodded. Uncomfortable makes for good television. The crowd laughed again, nervous laughter, uncertain whether to pick sides. Harry leaned back, his voice dripping disdain. You're mocking what you don't understand. You don't understand loyalty, legacy, or what it means to carry something that heavy. Jon's gaze softened. You're right again. But I do understand when someone's trying too hard to prove they've let go while gripping the past with both hands. That did it. Harry's mask cracked, his face reddened, his breathing sharper. You think you're clever, don't you? You think these little jokes make you profound. You're just another smug American pretending to get the monarchy because it sells ad space. Jon smiled faintly, but this time there was no humor. And you're just another runaway prince pretending he doesn't miss the palace lights. The studio gasped. The director in the control booth muttered, "Cut to break," but Jon kept going. Let's not, he said softly, still locked on Harry. Let's keep the cameras rolling, because I think this, right here, is what honesty actually looks like. Harry glared at him, chest rising, voice trembling. You're lucky this is your show. Jon nodded slowly. I am, because right now, it's starting to feel like you'd throw me out of it. The audience stayed utterly still. Jon leaned back, eyes narrowing just slightly, and said, We'll be right back. Or maybe we won't. The screen faded to commercial, but no one in that studio moved. They all knew it wasn't over. It had only begun to burn. When The lights came back on, you could feel it. That invisible heaviness that settles in right before something breaks. The laughter signs were ignored, the band's intro faded faster than usual, and Jon Stewart's smile was there, but only as muscle memory. Prince Harry sat motionless, jaw set, posture military tight, eyes fixed on the desk like he was holding himself back from saying something catastrophic. Jon cleared his throat, his voice steady but clipped. We're back with Prince Harry, the man, the myth, well, let's just say, the topic of roughly 8,000 think pieces. A few uneasy laughs fluttered through the crowd. Harry didn't move. Jon leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Look, Harry, before we dive back in, I just want to say, my job is to ask questions. You've lived a complicated life. I respect that. But when you come on a show like this, you've got to know that I'm not the BBC, and this isn't Palace PR. We talk, we challenge. That's the deal. Harry looked up at him, his tone sharp as glass. Challenge is fine, Jon, but the problem with people like you is you confuse curiosity with judgment. Jon's eyebrows lifted slightly. And the problem with people like you, he said softly, is that you confuse criticism with persecution. The audience murmured. The air in the studio tightened. Harry leaned forward, his voice dropping an octave. You think because you sit behind a desk with cue cards and clever jokes that you can moralize about my life? You have no idea what I've lived through. You didn't watch your mother die because of people like you. Jon's face froze. The studio went silent. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, heavy. You're right, I didn't. And I'd never claim to understand that kind of loss. But grief doesn't give anyone a lifetime pass to treat everyone else like enemies. Harry's lips curled into a cold smirk. Enemies? You think I care what people like you think of me? I've outgrown this nonsense. You're the one still chasing relevance by dragging other people's pain onto a stage. Jon exhaled slowly. That's a funny accusation coming from someone who made his trauma a bestseller. A low gasp rippled through the audience. Harry chuckled bitterly. You really think this is all about money, don't you? You small-minded Americans always do. You can't imagine that someone might actually care about something beyond their next paycheck. Jon tilted his head slightly. Oh, I can imagine it, Your Highness. I just haven't seen much evidence of it tonight. The crowd gave a stunned, stifled laugh. Harry's eyes narrowed. You're trying to make me look like the villain, Jon smiled faintly. You're doing a good job of that yourself. The line landed like a punch. Harry slammed his palm lightly against the armrest. You think this is funny? He snapped. You're mocking everything I've worked for. Jon's tone stayed even, but his eyes had gone cold. No, I'm just trying to keep up with the contradictions. 1 minute you want privacy, the next you're on camera reminding everyone how much you hate being on camera. You call for empathy while talking down to anyone who asks a hard question. It's confusing. Harry leaned closer, voice low and venomous. You're confusing arrogance with confidence. You don't intimidate me, Jon. Jon smirked. That's good, because it's really not my goal to intimidate grown men. Harry laughed once bitterly. You think you're clever, but all you do is hide behind humor. You've made a career out of being snide and calling it truth. Jon folded his hands. And you've made a career out of being misunderstood and calling it courage. The audience audibly gasped this time. Harry's expression cracked. Anger, disbelief, something darker. You're unbelievable, he said, his voice trembling now. You sit there smirking like you have any idea what it's like to live in my skin. Jon nodded slowly. You're right again, I don't. But I do know what it looks like when someone mistakes pity for purpose. That landed. You could see the flash of red behind Harry's eyes. His jaw clenched, his nostrils flared. You're a disgrace, he hissed. Jon sat back, his tone still calm. And you're losing the plot. The crowd didn't laugh this time. They could feel it. The line had been crossed. Jon straightened his papers, though he clearly wasn't reading them anymore. Let's talk about something lighter, he said, voice tense. Maybe California. How's life been since leaving London? Harry gave a cold smirk. Peaceful, until tonight. Jon chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. Harry leaned back, crossing his arms. You can take it however your ego needs to. Jon nodded slowly, lips pressed together, the kind of expression that says, this is about to end badly. Harry, I'm starting to think peace follows you like a restraining order. The audience gasped again, half shocked, half amused. Harry stood suddenly, not shouting yet, but close. You're not going to sit there and disrespect me. Jon stayed seated, gaze steady. Then maybe stop making it so easy. The silence stretched. One camera operator's hand actually shook. Harry pointed toward him, voice rising. This right here is exactly what's wrong with media. You twist, you provoke, and then you act surprised when people fight back. Jon nodded once, quietly. Yeah. And you fight back even when no one's swinging. The band wasn't playing, the teleprompter wasn't rolling, and still, Jon's composure never cracked. Harry's, on the other hand, was disintegrating in real time. I came here in good faith, Harry snapped. I thought maybe you'd have the decency to talk like a man, not a parody of one. Jon exhaled, slow and tired. And I thought you came here to talk about your work, not to audition for the world's angriest memoir sequel. Harry froze. His voice dropped to a near whisper, the kind that comes before an explosion. You'll regret that? Jon leaned forward slightly, voice low, deliberate. You've been saying that to everyone for years, Harry, and the only one who keeps losing is you. It hit like thunder. Harry stood there, livid, speechless. The crowd didn't clap, didn't move. It was as if they were watching something they weren't supposed to see. Jon finally broke the silence. We'll be right back, he said, looking straight at the camera, eyes like ice. Or maybe not. The applause sign flickered again, but no one dared to follow it. Because in that moment, every person in that studio knew the next round wasn't going to be talk show entertainment. It was going to be a firestorm. The audience could feel it before a word was spoken. The hum of the lights, the shifting in chairs, even the camera crew's silence. It all pulsed with the same tension. Someone's about to break. Jon Stewart returned from the commercial break with a half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Welcome back, he said slowly, voice lower now. We're still here with Prince Harry, and I say still because I think most of the country assumed we wouldn't be. A few people laughed nervously. Harry didn't. He sat rigid, eyes fixed on Jon like a man daring his opponent to flinch first. Jon straightened a few cards that didn't need straightening. All right, let's try to steer this back. You've made some big claims about family, about the monarchy, about the press, but... Harry cut in sharply. But what, Jon? You want me to apologize for speaking my truth? You want me to bow again, this time to American media instead of British royalty? Jon leaned back in his chair. No, I just want to make sure this truth you keep selling still comes with a warranty. The audience gasped, some covering their mouths, others frozen mid-clap. Harry's jaw flexed. You're mocking what I've lived through. I'm challenging what you've turned it into, Jon said evenly. There's a difference. You keep saying you hate the spotlight, but somehow, you never leave the stage. Harry's tone rose, sharp and cold. You sound like every jealous tabloid hack I've ever met, sitting there, smug and bitter, pretending your sarcasm is intelligence. Jon chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. And you sound like every privileged man who's been told no for the first time and doesn't know what to do about it. The room collectively exhaled. Harry leaned forward, voice trembling now, a mix of fury and disbelief. You think this is funny? You think losing my mother, losing my family, being hunted, betrayed, you think that's a joke? Jon shook his head, calm but visibly done playing mediator. No, I think it's tragic, but I also think you've mistaken tragedy for identity. You talk about moving on, but all you ever do is circle the wreckage. Harry laughed, sharp, humorless. You're unbelievable. You think you're some kind of hero for calling me out on live TV? Jon's voice hardened. No, Harry. I think I'm one of the few people in this business still willing to say what everyone else is thinking. The crowd murmured. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Harry stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. You're crossing a line. Jon remained seated, looking up at him with the calm of a man who'd had enough. And you've been drawing new ones all night. Harry's face flushed red. You invited me here to humiliate me. I invited you here to have a conversation, Jon replied, voice measured but cold. You turned it into a courtroom. and you're the one on the witness stand. Harry jabbed a finger toward him. You Americans love to drag others down. That's all you do. Sit in judgment while pretending to care. You're no better than the press that chased my mother. That hit the room like a slap. Even Jon blinked. The entire audience went dead silent. He straightened his tie, the only sign of tension. Careful, Harry, he said softly. Comparing a talk show to your mother's death isn't righteous. It's reckless. Harry's breathing was uneven now. You think you're clever, don't you? You think mocking me makes you brave? Jon finally stood up, slowly, deliberately. Brave would have been you staying in the palace and fixing the mess instead of cashing in on it. The gasp from the audience was instant and deafening. Harry took a step closer, his voice cracking with anger. You don't know what you're talking about. Jon held his ground. Then enlighten me. Tell me one thing you've done in the past 2 years that wasn't about proving everyone else wrong. Harry hesitated. Just for a second. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Jon's expression softened. Just barely. Exactly, he said. You've spent so long fighting ghosts that you've forgotten what living looks like. Harry's voice broke. You're disgusting. Jon exhaled. And you're exhausting. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the lights. Jon turned to the control room window. Cut the feed, he said calmly. We're done here. The producer's voice crackled faintly in the earpiece. Are you sure? Jon didn't look away from Harry. Yeah, he said. Dead sure. Harry's face twisted in disbelief. You're cutting me off? Jon nodded. No, I'm letting you go. There's a difference. You came here to talk, not to listen. That's not how this show works. Harry's voice rose, trembling with fury. You can't just end this. I just did, Jon said firmly. The red on-air light went dark. The band didn't play. No outro music. Just silence. Jon gestured toward the side of the stage. Security, please escort our guest out. Harry stepped back. You're serious? Very, Jon said. This isn't therapy, it's television, and you just ran out of goodwill. Harry stared at him, stunned, shaking his head. You'll regret this. Jon gave a small, sad smile. Probably, but at least I'll sleep tonight. Harry's lips parted as if to fire back, but he stopped himself. The tension drained just enough to leave behind something almost human. Frustration, shame, maybe even pain. Then he turned on his heel and stormed off the set, ripping off his mic as the cables tangled at his feet. The audience didn't clap. They didn't move. It was the rare kind of silence that lives between shock and disbelief. Jon adjusted his jacket, sat back down, and looked straight into the camera that was still quietly rolling. Well, he said dryly, that went about as well as Brexit. Laughter finally broke through, cautious, uncertain, but grateful for relief. Jon leaned forward, his tone softer now. Folks, I've interviewed presidents, war heroes, even conspiracy theorists who thought lizards run the government, but I've never seen someone so determined to fight everyone around him, including the mirror. He exhaled slowly. We wish him peace, because clearly that's what he's still looking for. The studio applauded, this time gently, respectfully. The credits began to roll, and the last shot caught Jon glancing toward the empty guest chair, still warm, still humming from the chaos that had just burned through it. What do you think? Was Jon right to push back the way he did? Or did Harry go too far this time? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of when late-night television completely came unglued, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next shocking celebrity show.